Good evening, everyone. This is Jeff at Mississippi in the Civil War. Tonight, we're continuing our series on researching your Civil War ancestor. And tonight, we're going to be talking about the United Confederate Veterans, their successor organization, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and then the female counterpart to the United Confederate Veterans, the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And we'll be doing a separate episode at a later time on the Union organization, the Grand Army of the Republic. That will be coming very shortly. Hopefully I'll have it out by the end of the week. But if you like this program, please give it a like and thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. It really helps me gauge how much people enjoy these programs and makes me want to do more. So yeah, any shout outs or positive feedback I would very much appreciate. But the picture I used here for the start of the episode here is a great image of a group of United Confederate veterans. It was taken on the battlefield of Harrisburg, Mississippi, right outside of Tupelo. And these veterans were on their way to a reunion at Memphis, and they stopped in Harrisburg to tour the old battlefield, and they got their picture made in front of this old tree that had still had a cannonball hole through it from the battle. So it's just really a cool picture. This is in the collections of the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, but it's just a great image of a group of Confederate veterans. Now, in the aftermath of the Civil War, there were many organizations founded to commemorate, memorialize, and remember the history of Confederate soldiers that fought in the Civil War. There were a wide variety of veterans groups, but I'm just going to be speaking on the United Confederate Veterans, their successor, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and then the female counterpart, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, because this is by far the largest veterans organization on the Confederate side, and this is the one that has the most documentation for its members. And this is the one, if your relative was in a veterans organization, this is probably the one they were going to be in. But the United Confederate Veterans, also better known by their initials, the UCV, was founded in 1889 in New Orleans, and it very quickly became the preeminent Confederate veterans organization, managing the interests of Confederate veterans nationwide. The United Confederate Veterans was very popular. By 1903, it had a nationwide peak membership of about 80,000 members, which was about 1/3 of the surviving Southern veterans at the time. And shown in the illustrations here on the left, this is a badge from one of the Confederate reunions that was actually held on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. In the center is a button from a United Confederate Veterans uniform that a lot of the veterans like to wear. And then on the right is a booklet, Organization of Camps of the United Confederate Veterans. This was published for the reunion held in Mobile, Alabama in April 1910. So there's a lot of documentation on the United Confederate Veterans, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, is how you can use this information to try and find out more about your relative's Civil War service. But the UCV was organized along military lines. The organization sponsored local meetings of individual camps. It also organized state and national annual reunions. The officers of the UCV were given rank designations in the organization, and this often leads to a lot of confusion because descendants often mistake their United Confederate Veterans rank for their wartime rank. Just because somebody was a colonel or a captain in the UCV, they might have been a private in the war or a corporal, and a lot of people don't really understand that, so it tends to lead to some confusion. But shown in this illustration here, this is a photograph taken of a group of United Confederate veterans from Tippah County at a local reunion held at Stonewall College in Ripley, Mississippi. And it's not dated, but I would say this is probably early 1900s, between probably 1900 and 1910. Now, the UCV devoted itself to organizing public ceremonies to help remember the Confederate soldier and the sacrifices they had made during the war. They paid for and dedicated monuments. They had Memorial Day celebrations. They sponsored relief efforts for needy veterans and their families. They also got involved in politics. They lobbied the state government to provide pensions and old soldiers' homes for needy veterans. They also helped to pay for the funerals and other costs for needy Confederates. So they had a lot of altruistic intentions and did a lot of good for their fellow soldiers. The UCV played a very important role in Southern society well into the 20th century. And shown in the picture above, this is one of my favorite UCV pictures. It shows a group of survivors of the Downing Rifles, which were Company C, 3rd Mississippi Infantry. That was a company that was raised from my hometown of Bolton, Mississippi. And this picture was taken in 1908, and they're sitting on the Confederate Veterans Monument that was in the courthouse lawn at Raymond, Mississippi. And that monument's still there. I used to drive by it all the time going to school. And it's kind of neat to see that same monument still there in the same place where these old veterans used to gather around it. The United Confederate Veterans camps in Mississippi were part of the Mississippi Division of the United Confederate Veterans. The Mississippi Division had approximately 106 camps, which were spread literally all over the state. Almost every city and town of any size in Mississippi had its own camp, and the great thing about this is that the meetings and activities of these local camps were usually covered pretty extensively by their local newspapers, and you can still find a lot of this documentation today, which can really help you find out what your veteran relative was doing as a member of this organization. Fortunately, there are online a number of digitized Mississippi newspapers. The free Chronicling America website, sponsored by the Library of Congress, is an excellent one. It doesn't cost a thing, and it's searchable. Also, if you've got access to the paynewspapers.com, it has even more newspapers from Mississippi. So between those two sites, you can find quite a lot on most UCV camps in the state. And just to give you an example, I put some newspaper articles up here that I found online. The one on the very left here is a write-up about E.D. Cabot, who served in the 19th Mississippi Infantry. This is from the Macon Beacon, February 11th, 1916. On the right is an article about Mississippians planning to attend the UCV National Reunion in Dallas, Texas. That's from the Times of Greenville, March 29th, 1902. And then in the very center, there's an ad for the Illinois Central Railroad offering transportation to veterans for a reunion in Houston, Texas. That's from the Canton Times, May 17th, 1895. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's just a few of the many thousands of articles you can find about the UCV, its activities, and its membership. With just a little bit of digging, you can find all kinds of material. Now, another very useful source for researching your relative who was in the UCV is the United Confederate Veterans official magazine, Confederate Veteran Magazine. Confederate Veteran Magazine was published monthly between 1893 and 1932. That's nearly 40 years of articles. And these articles dealt with everything from old soldiers writing in about their reminiscences of the war. There were obituaries for members that passed away, many of them including photographs of the veteran. It also included information from the Sons of Confederate Veterans and the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So this magazine is just a wealth of information. And the great thing about it, almost every issue has been digitized and they're available online. You go to Google and just type in Confederate Veteran Magazine Internet Archive, and that'll bring you right to the site where you can look at just about every issue that's available. It's a wonderful source. And Another great thing is that there is an index for the Confederate Veteran magazine. The online index is put out by the Library of Virginia. I found it to be so-so. It misses a lot of names. A better index, although it's not online, is the 3-volume Confederate Veteran Magazine Index in book form. Most major libraries in Mississippi are probably going to have this, and it's very useful. If your local library doesn't have it, the State Archive in Jackson does have this set. You might find your veteran listed by name in here, and it will give you the volume and the page number. Or even if your relative is not mentioned directly, there might be an article by somebody in his unit. If you really want to find out what he was doing during the war, look at some of the articles written by men that served in the same regiment. That's one of your best ways of finding out, the kind of experiences your relative would have had during the war. And in addition, there are lots of sources available at the State Archive related to various United Confederate veteran camps. For example, these are just a few that I picked off the Mississippi Department of Archives and History online catalog, such as roster and sketches of several military companies that were in regular service of the Confederate States during the Civil War from Yazoo County, Mississippi. Boy, that's a long title. Published in 1905 by Yazoo Camp number 176. Another is Vicksburg UCV Camp, published by Vicksburg Camp number 32. And then also the Confederate Army Records of Adams County, Mississippi, published by Camp number 20 in Adams County. There are just any number of these articles and publications by various camps throughout the state. And if you find one for the camp that your relative belonged in, you might find a good bit of information about his activities in that particular camp. So it's well worth checking both the State Archive and your local libraries to see if they have any information on your local UCV camp. And shown as illustrations here, just a couple of great shots of United Confederate veterans wearing a lot of their memorabilia. On the left, let's see, is John Henderson Freeman of the 34th Mississippi Infantry, wearing this great ribbon that says Walthall's Brigade. He was very proud of the brigade he served in, which Walthall's had a very good reputation for being a hard fighting brigade during the Civil War. He's also wearing on his lapel a UCV reunion badge. In the center, Silas Buck posing with the regimental flag of the 16th Confederate Cavalry that he served in during the war. And then on the right is Thomas Loring Lloyd of the 14th Mississippi Infantry, again wearing a UCV reunion ribbon and his UCV uniform. Just some great shots of three Confederate veterans from the state. Now, another organization that was very closely tied to the UCV was the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And it was the outgrowth of many local memorial, monument, and Confederate home associations and auxiliaries to camps of the United Confederate Veterans. It is the oldest patriotic organization in our country because of its connection with two statewide organizations that came into existence as early as 1890. The Daughters of the Confederacy in Missouri and the Ladies Auxiliary of the Confederate Soldiers Home in Tennessee. The National Association of the Daughters of the Confederacy was organized in Nashville, Tennessee on September 10, 1894. It was founded by Mrs. Caroline Meriwether Goodlett of Nashville and Mrs. Anna Davenport Raines of Georgia. At its second meeting in Atlanta, Georgia in 1895, the organization changed its name to the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the name by which it is still known today. And it was incorporated under the laws of the District of Columbia on July 18, 1919. The Mississippi Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy was organized at Meridian by Mrs. Albert Weems on April 27, 1897. This division was very active, playing a prominent part in the laying of the cornerstone of the new Capitol, which was laid on Jefferson Davis's birthday. Also in helping to organize a campaign to make that day a state holiday, which it still is today. It erected most of the Confederate monuments in Mississippi, and it placed hundreds of headstones on the graves of Confederate dead in the state. By May 1905, there were 65 chapters in the state with a membership of almost 2,400. And the Mississippi Department of Archives and History has a number of sources related to the United Daughters of the Confederacy. One of them, and probably one of the most useful, is the newspaper Our Heritage, which was the newsletter of the organization. And they do have this publication on microfilm at the State Archive. And just to give you an example of some of the kinds of articles it has, there's a lot of information about Confederate veterans in the magazine, such as this issue, which has a write-up about W.A. Montgomery, a well-known veteran from Hinds County. Also another write-up about Captain H.L. Taylor, who was commander of the Yazoo camp of the United Confederate Veterans. Our Heritage also has obituaries of soldiers, such as this issue, which has an obit of John Patterson, who served in the 1st Mississippi Light Artillery. So it's well worth your time to go through this publication, because it does have some very useful information on veterans from the state of Mississippi. And if you look at many photos of Confederate veterans, you'll see a lot of them wearing this medal. And this is known as the Southern Cross of Honor. It was a simple bronze medal that was given by the United Daughters of the Confederacy to a Confederate veteran of the Army or Navy, or his widow or his eldest lineal descendant. The idea originated in 1898 with Mary Ann Lamar Cobb Irwin, and the design was submitted by Mrs. S.E. Gabbett in 1899. The medal was cast in the shape of a Maltese cross at a cost of 13 cents. The design and the cost were to be kept simple, so the medal itself would not be intrinsically valued, but that it would have sentimental value that would increase over time. The first Southern Cross of Honor medal was awarded April 26, 1900, on one of the Memorial Days designated by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The medal was awarded up until 1951, and then ceased at that time, as there were no more Confederate veterans to award them to. And after that, in 1954, the United Daughters of the Confederacy began collecting medals from deceased veterans for donation to local museums. And the United Daughters of the Confederacy was very good about keeping records of who these crosses were issued to. And fortunately, the Mississippi Department of Archives and History does have these bound records at the archive. There are 2 volumes of these awardee lists. Volume 1 follows an approximate chronological order. Volume 2 follows a reverse chronological order. But both volumes list the following categories on their record sheets. They give the name of the veteran, his rank, company and regiment, dates enlisted and discharged, the veterans UCV camp they belong to, the date the cross was bestowed on them, and the name of the descendant or widow in the case of the cross being awarded to a family member if the veteran himself was already deceased. And sometimes the awardee of the cross would have his name and unit inscribed, as this one did. This is the Cross of Honor that belonged to F.W. Whitaker, who served in Company I of the 4th Mississippi Cavalry. So these records are readily available at the State Archive, and it's well worth your time if you think your relative may have been awarded a Southern Cross to check at the archive and see if there is any information about the awarding of that cross to them. Now, the Cross of Honor, one reason it's really pretty neat is that it has information in it that may not be anywhere else. For example, one veteran listed in the Southern Cross of Honor records is Charles B.N. Rice of Copiah County. He was presented his medal on April 26, 1914 by the Charles E. Hooker chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. Rice listed his unit on the application as a, quote, member of the Home Guard, a group for which there is little or no documentation. In fact, his Southern Cross of Honor application may be the sole surviving document that mentions anything about his service, because Home Guard was not very well documented during the war. And also, another very useful piece of information, the Cross of Honor applications had a space reserved to list the recipient's next of kin. It wasn't always filled out, but a lot of times it was. For the veterans that did list a relative, this information might be very useful to a researcher. When Joseph H. Askin applied for his cross, he listed his next of kin as Mrs. Frank C. Owen and Mary A. Owen, daughters. George W. Harris listed his nearest relative as S.P. Harris, son, in Verona, Mississippi. Some of the Southern Cross of Honor listings also have additional information that can provide useful insights into the wartime service or post-war life of the veteran. On the application of William J. Briers, there's a notation that he, quote, died in Meridian, January 19th, 1909. E.H. Gregory's listing notes that he was, quote, honorably discharged at Columbus, Mississippi on leave of absence caused by wounds, May 1865. And A.C. Minter also had to apply for a replacement cross, and it was noted in the records that, quote, Mr. Minter lost his first cross when his home burned January 19th, 1914. And just shown in the pictures here, these are both from Confederate Veteran magazine, and they show two veterans wearing their crosses of honor. Southern veterans really loved this medal, and they valued it very highly, and they very often wore it on their clothing. On the left is C.C. Cummings, who was a member of the 17th Mississippi Infantry, and on the right is William D. Mims, who also served in the 17th Mississippi Infantry. Both men proudly displaying their crosses. And a lot of veterans chose to be buried wearing their crosses of honor. So a lot of them, unfortunately, are no longer around. They're buried with the veteran because they valued them so highly. And this brings this episode to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please just post them. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. I will be coming back hopefully by the end of the week with an episode on the Union Veterans Organization, the Grand Army of the Republic. And until then, have a great week, and I'll see you soon.